Hi, welcome to this next chapter in my Learn Squared tutorial. Let's take a look at what we're going to do here. We're going to do something that's a little more exciting than just looking at a donut. We are going to make our own multi-scatter operator here in Houdini, and what it's going to do is use a variety of ways to scatter points on the object and inside the object, and then control how objects get copied onto those points. So we'll take a look at the network here really quickly. And this is just some random color to show you that we're going to inherit color from our object. We're just assigning some normals. Here I'm showing that we can actually paint on our object to determine where we want to place our new objects. And then we'll take a quick look at the actual tool. So you see that we have a way of outputting points, or we can output geometry that gets put onto these points. We can choose to scatter on the surface or inside the volume of our object. Inside the volume of our object, we can choose to do grid structures. So here it's a tetrahedral pattern, there it's a grid. Or we can just do a random scatter inside the volume of our object. Going back to surface mode, let's take a quick look at our options there. So we have count that we can dial up and down. I'm just going to keep this at 1,000 for now. And we can also do some relaxation along the surface that will try its best to make sure we have an even distribution of points. I'm going to dial this count down pretty low to about 500 because we're going to look at geometry and how that works on our object here. So we've got controls here for scale, rotation, and color. And then we have a tool here that will allow us to assign objects. So it's not defaulted at 3, it's actually defaulted at 1, but we can just keep adding objects into this parameter window here, and it will just randomly distribute them onto the points, and it makes sure that the points don't get the same object. So they don't overlap each other. Each point gets a different random object assigned to them. I'm just going to turn on our geometry here so that we can look. You can see that I've got some tree models that are being copied onto the points here. And right away you can see that the trees take on the color of the geometry. And we can go back into our instance properties here, and you can see that we've got some kind of randomness built in. So I can start changing the scale of the trees and just randomizing them. And we can start playing with rotation as well. We've got a kind of random spin in here that we can start doing. So the trees will start to just randomly spin around their axis. And then we have just plain random rotational values, which will kind of randomize in all 3 directions how the trees are oriented or the objects are oriented on our surface. Going back into our scatter option, we can choose a texture or an attribute that we want to control how everything is scattered on here. And then I'm going to show you some ways of handling the rendering of this stuff, because at the end we're going to take some geometry that's about as complicated as this tree, probably actually even a little bit more complicated than the tree, and we're going to render 1 million instances of this in Houdini, and our render time is going to come in really great. It's going to be about 7 minutes, I think, for a frame, and it's going to take a look at some really interesting strategies as well for render efficiencies for doing this kind of insane level of detail. So stick with it. I think you'll find it to be challenging, but really rewarding by the end of this. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side of this lesson.